Hi, everybody. I am Jen Johnson, and you are watching Thought by Thought Healing. And I'm really excited to have Jen Leffler here with me today. She is a client of mine and has an amazing success story with her pain and other things like emotional healing and spiritual and mental healing. So I just wanted to welcome her. Thank you, Jen, for being here and for be willing to share and be vulnerable with people to basically also to be known um, and also to be encouraged by your story. So thanks for being here. I'll let you introduce yourself and just talk a little bit about your pain journey before you started working with me, and we'll go from there.
Okay, well, great. Well, my name is Jen Leffler, and I have dealt with chronic pain for over 13 years. I've had shoulder pain that whole time, and then about 5 years ago, started with hip pain and foot pain in there as well. So I've dealt with all three off and on. Mostly the shoulder pain has been pretty constant, but the others have kind of been off and on. And I have seen doctors, I've seen physical therapists, I've seen chiropractors, I've done trigger point therapy, I've done anti-inflammatory diets, acupuncture, massage. I feel like I've covered quite a few different therapies that are out there. And it seemed like everyone did help, but never really took away the pain, never really dealt with the source of the pain. And yeah, so that's kind of the start of the desperation, I guess, that led me to Curable. That is where I started my healing journey, and that was about a year and a couple months ago.
Yeah,
Um,
I love Curable.
Yes, yes. I happened upon a recovery story, and it just was very similar to my own story. And as I listened to that, I just started thinking, well, maybe there's something to this. I was still really skeptical, but I decided to go ahead and try out the free trial that they give, and I s- I was amazed at how simple and how the mind and the body connection, it just really made sense in a way that I never understood before. So, that's
Yeah,
how it
it's
started.
it's so interesting how we tend to separate our brains and our thoughts from our body. And in
Right,
reality, they are totally linked.
right. And God's design.
Yes. Yes. And I love that. I love that we can't look past the science when it comes to chronic pain, and the science points to our thoughts in our brain, and the Bible and Jesus are constantly directing us to redirect our thoughts and our emotions. And he cares so much about that part of us. And so I just love that full circle of him caring about our brains and our thoughts and our emotional health, and how that plays out in our physical symptoms too.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah. So you found Curable and you
Mhm,
you started using it on a daily basis. Is that true?
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
How long did you do that?
I mean, when I first started, I probably did a couple lessons a day, and, as I started, it just started making more and more sense. And then I had kind of a turning point moment that I think that helped fuel the fire. I was able to sit on a hard metal bleacher for an hour and a half while my daughter was doing a softball game. And just to give you context in that, I was having a hard time just sitting in a cushioned chair to drive
Yep.
for 10, 15 minutes. So for me to be able to sit on a hard bleacher for an hour and a half was a really big victory.
Yeah.
And I continued to have those kind of victories as I embraced the ideas and the method. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's how it started.
So were you kind of sold on it immediately, or did it take you a while to, I don't know, to create that evidence that we've talked about before, that
Right, right.
your pain was caused by the
So
brain.
it did take a while. Like I said, I was a little bit skeptical about it. And I kind of had grown up in an environment of, stay away from stuff that has to do with the mind because that's just weird and
Mhm.
might be a little
New
new
age.
agey or something. And I found that it really wasn't anything that was that made me uncomfortable. Everything that was presented in Curable was mainly about breathing and just being in the present, and then also just understanding that connection between the mind and the body and how our emotions can and do affect our bodies.
Yeah.
And I never had understood that before. So that was a real turning point for me too. Just starting to be able to express my emotions, and actually that was helped along by you, um, even more. So
So did you have a pretty significant turning point in like your physical symptoms before you started meeting with me? It's very interesting because we have never talked
yes,
about this.
yes,
Okay.
actually yes. So victory for me was simple. It was I could actually you know, sit and weed my front garden, or I could unload the dishwasher and not have pain, or things that I thought I should be able to do on an everyday basis were really hard for me. And I found myself continually having to decide at the beginning of the day, okay, if I do this one thing, then I'm not going to be able to do this other thing. And
This
so
was
I
before your
always
healing?
before my healing. And so I was always doing that debate and being frustrated by that debate. And as I started getting the concepts of how the mind and the body are connected, I started being able to do those things without any pain. I could chop up veggies for dinner
Yeah.
and have no pain when I was doing that, and then still be able to go and do some weeding in my front yard. So it just that really encouraged me to keep pushing and keep trying things that I hadn't been able to do.
Yeah. So I'm curious, just for our watchers, what are maybe three tools that you used or phrases that that you recited, your mantra, whatever. What was it that you found the most powerful in retraining your brain that these sensations didn't have to be painful?
So I think the evidence sheet was a really great tool in the beginning.
Okay.
That's where I listed where I would have a symptom, but I'd be able to do a similar body movement and not have symptoms. And so I was able to kind of see that there, this doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to be a structural issue. I think once I really grasped onto that, that helped a lot. I also had never really journaled in a way that was um, getting things out. I typically journaled in a way that somebody else could read it, kind of like a
Yeah.
story of my life. So
Yeah.
I've always journaled, but I found that actually saying how I feel and allowing myself that space to even be angry on the page, um, it it really, really made a difference for me. So
Okay.
that was a big tool. Your Psalm It Out, and then also the inner dialogue, that was really key for me. There were just so many thoughts that I continually had going on that were not helpful. And as I was able to write them down, I realized this, I don't want to think this way anymore. And I don't think this is a good way to think. And so that was a really big tool for me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, when I summarize my personal healing journey, I often say that I healed mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and finally physically.
Mhm.
For me, the physically came last.
Sure.
The real punch of being able to live my life as I wanted to without the pain or without fearing the pain. I'm
Right.
curious, I already know the answer to this question, but I'm curious for you to share if you had healing in other areas of your life besides physically in this journey. And do you
Absolutely.
find those connected to your symptoms and how? This is my favorite part of your story.
Well, me being able to have this interview is a big victory for me.
Yes.
I believe that my confidence has really, really changed from the first time you and I met. I was really nervous, really scared. Never wanted to put myself in front of a camera.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
so that's been a huge, huge change for me. The other thing I think you're going to mention this is that I actually was able to give a sermon
Yeah.
a couple weeks ago, and I had the most amazing time. I was not afraid. I was able to share what God had put on my heart, and I had the confidence that what I was saying was worthwhile, and that it would help somebody else.
Yeah. I listened to it and it was definitely worthwhile. Um, I don't know if our watchers can see that anywhere. If so, maybe you could put it in the show notes afterwards. But she just talks, and I'm not going to summarize. I'll let you talk more about it. But she talks about fear and its role. It, well, you summarize it, Jen.
Well, it was actually a concept I learned from you. This idea that so many times in the Bible, when it says not to fear, I a lot of times would feel like, well, I've already failed. I'm already afraid. I'm not that brave. And but what you showed me is that every time it says do not fear, there's a reason why God says do not fear. And it has to do with the fact that he's going to be with us, that he's going to fight our battles, that he's going to be the one that that ultimately we can rely on. And so the reason that it says not to be afraid is not like a don't you dare be afraid, but it's a idea that you don't need to be afraid.
Yeah, yeah. I love that so much.
Mm.
Um, and in that too is this piece of my identity doesn't depend on this thing that I'm fearing doing.
Amen.
Yeah. And so that takes the fear away too of failure, because it doesn't really matter if I succeed at this thing that I'm so scared of,
Yeah,
because my identity lies in this God that loves me and is with me and has all these amazing promises for us.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. And yeah,
So
your sermon is beautiful in talking about the role of fear and that we don't have to have that fear and why. And so I would strongly suggest anybody listen to that. It's very beautiful and just it really honors God too. Um, because I think part of this work is learning and knowing that you are loved. And
yes.
when we are scared of God and scared of
Hmm.
failing God and his commands, that fear plays out in our nervous system and plays out in our pain.
Right.
Yeah.
And I never understood that before. So that because I've been a Christian for, since I was 7 years old, a lot of years. But I never really understood um how God really does love me, and that it matters how I think about myself, and not in a conceited way, but in a
Assured.
way of thank you, Lord, that you created me. Because I didn't used to be able to say that. When I
Mm.
first started with my mantra, you probably remember, I couldn't even say it.
Yeah.
Even though I knew this is what God had put on my heart to say, I couldn't even say the words. And one of the words was, I'm worthwhile. And I would cry every time I had to say it because I think I just didn't believe it. So this has been a really amazing healing journey for me.
Yeah. And it's just so interesting that here we are here talking about spiritual and emotional and mental healing. And yet we're talking about physical healing because
Yes,
as you learned that you were safe in the Lord, you're you were also challenging your fear of your pain.
exactly.
Um, and that played out in healing physically. And I know healing is a journey. You're still on it, but
Right.
wow, your life is so much different.
I went camping in the rain last weekend.
I love this. Yeah.
That was a big deal for me. I am typically a fair weather camper. I mean, I have to say props to my husband and the other families that we were camping with because they made it um, so much more pleasant with tarps and, just really making a place for us to be able to still hang out. But having a good attitude through that whole thing
Yeah.
and just the prep work. I mean, there's so much that goes into camping, and I have done it for years with my family, and it has always been a a um, a labor of love because it hurts so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would have so much pain, doing the prep work, carrying around these big, heavy, bins, and then dreading going home and having, loads and loads of laundry and all the tents. Well, this time we actually had to lay them all out to dry them out. But all of that, I had no pain. So
That's so amazing.
just so thankful. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Okay. So just kind of in closing, which probably will take a while, if you were going to give people 3 tips who can't afford coaching, because I really try to put a lot of content out here for people who
Mhm.
can't do a program, um, and you're free to talk about any of my tools that I use in coaching and describe them if you wish. Anything, any advice that you have for people?
So for one thing, the Curable app, there are 13 lessons that are really phenomenal. They are simple. Uh, they're made in a really practical way that you can just, put into practice right away.
Yep.
So I would definitely take advantage of that. And I think even you have some kind of a promo that you're able to give for.
Yeah. So I think the free trial for that Curable gives is 2 weeks, if I'm correct.
Oh,
And
okay.
and I am considered a practitioner with them, and so I can give a 6-week trial. I don't know if it has different options.
Mm,
I'll have to look into that, but I know it's longer of a period. So
sure, sure.
yeah,
So definitely I would look into that because I think that gives you the foundation to understand how the brain and the body work together.
yeah,
Um, and then I think also definitely your tool, the Psalm It Out, very simple, 5 minutes, excuse me, 5 minutes of brainstorming on a topic and then taking that time writing out, kind of from that brainstorm. I just use that as a frame to just write about the different things. Writing somehow, I don't exactly understand, but what I do understand is that the the brain has to process through through your writing, the ability to actually express words.
yeah,
It has to go through the logical part of your brain. And I think as it does that, it's like you just have all these aha moments where you realize, oh gosh, I didn't even realize I thought that, or I was afraid of that. Or, I was angry about that thing that happened 20 years ago. And then as what I really love about Jen's approach is she then has the third step, which is to ask the Lord, kind of put it in the Lord's hands and ask him, what do you want me to take away from this? And what do you want me to leave behind? And
Mm.
as you do that, I feel like that's where you really make some progress.
Yeah.
And so that's, let's see, that's number two.
Yeah.
And then the third thing I would say is just know that there's hope. It does not have to be, the pain does not have to be the end of the story. You know, it doesn't have to be the way you live your life. And I think that's the thing I want to just communicate the most is that it feels hopeless when you're in it and you just don't have any answers and you've tried everything. It's a very desperate place. And I think that learning that you don't need to fear making it worse, because if it is not a structural issue, it's not going to get worse by doing things. So I think that was
Right.
a real key for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. A lot of people, when they're doing this, well, I shouldn't say a lot of people. There are some people who, when they do this work, they put um, so much intensity into the healing, like a pressure on themselves to
Right.
heal, that it
Yeah.
trips them up. I don't remember you experiencing that, but I'm curious if you did, and then also kind of um, how did you approach the healing journey if you didn't approach it with pressure?
So definitely that's part of my personality. That kind of overachiever, A plus, you know, kind of student that I was. So I did do it with some intensity at first. And then I learned that, well, I learned from Alan Gordon, his book, The Way Out. I learned that pressure, self-criticism,
Yep.
and worry. Those are the three big culprits that keep us in pain. And so learning that, it was like, okay, I got to take a step back. I've got to enjoy this process. You know, I've got to celebrate the victories. I think that was a big thing that you mentioned, was
Mhm.
celebrating your victories.
Yes.
And so in my journal, I would write those down as well, so that I could see, you know, I'm making progress here. Um, and then I think the other thing was just to be more light about life and myself, and realize it's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I kind of grew up in that mindset that I could never make a mistake. And I mean, who can live under that pressure? You know, there's just no way. Of course, we're going to make mistakes. So uh, I hope that answers the question.
It does, and it's interesting. I just want to share that I recently had a client who, because every week I give homework according to where my client is in their journey, and this week I gave homework of no homework, and
Mm.
treating light with that,
Yep.
treating life with that levity and that joy and lightness, because that is a big part of this, is learning that we get to just live life without that pressure, and sometimes that involves the healing journey too.
Right.
I think that Dan Buglio, that's kind of his big punch, which I agree is a big part of it, although I do think that for most people this emotional and spiritual piece is a big part.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier, I feel like I could just keep talking to you forever, but you mentioned earlier, like you having 9 out of the 10 personality traits.
Mm.
And something just I've been thinking about a lot lately, and kind of how to incorporate this in. But I think that sometimes as Christians, there's another piece of that
Mhm.
personality trait list, which is this need, or this fear of not having God's approval, or earning our salvation.
Right.
And I find that in this work, and I've seen this in you and in my own journey, that there comes this piece of realizing that He loves me in the journey,
Mhm.
whether I'm perfect or not, and taking that perfection piece off, even when it comes to our Christian walk.
Mhm.
Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that was one of the healing parts for me, was, like I say, realizing I can make a mistake and God was big enough to cover it, and I could laugh about it. I had as I was learning this, I was checking in with my one of my daughters, and it was so sweet because I asked her, what do you do if you make a mistake on a test or something and you realize, oh man, I even knew the answer to that and I just didn't get it right. And she said to me, I just love it. She said, Mom, sometimes it's better not to make more out of a mistake than it really is. And I just blinked. I was like, huh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like that is true too of even just the healing journey, because there's, starting out, some people have these, the book cure that they talk about with John
Right.
Sarno.
Right.
But most people have it like I did and you did, where there's these ups and downs and it can feel like, what am I doing wrong? I'm failing. And then we ruminate on like, well, what did I do to make this, this flare up and, all that. And
Right.
that rumination is just sending the brain into chaos.
I used to call the pain punishing pain. That's what it felt like. It felt like when I would do something that I wanted to do, especially, fun things with my family, and then I would have to pay for it, and it was a punishment. And so yes, I totally get that idea of feeling like something wrong.
Because that would keep you under control, right? So the pain was controlling you.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah. And in fact, that is not true.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I don't call it punishing pain anymore.
Yeah. It's so good. Yeah. All right. Well, I think I'm just really thankful that you were up for doing this. And I hope it is a blessing to other people. Feel free to ask any questions in the notes. And if you can post your sermon on fear, I would love that.
I'll find out if I can. I'm not sure what the rules are.
That's fair. All right. Sounds good. All right, everybody. Thank you. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see you back again next week. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.